too. I want to make time for that as well. But we're going to jump in, Larry. You know, we were just talking right before we went on. I've known you for, I guess, a few years now. But the thing that I didn't know is that you played and managed and coached in Italy. I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Tell us about that. How was that?
Oh, it was phenomenal. Yeah, it was. I didn't even know they played baseball professionally in Italy when I was in college, and so I ended up hurting myself my junior year, and I was hoping to get a look and an opportunity, obviously after my junior year. And a guy that I was working with, who actually was a family friend, who kind of served as an agent to help me, said, "Hey, while you're healing, why don't you go over after you're done and you know, this is 1990, and go play in Italy for a year. I got some contacts out there." And I was like, "Man, I don't play soccer." And he said, "No, it's baseball." I said, so I didn't even know, but yeah, I've got a chance to go out there. I went to Trieste, Italy. I played in Verona, played in a little town called Castione delle Mura, which is right outside of Udine in Northeast Italy. So yeah, had a great time.
So you still hold a little of that accent. Are you Italian at all, or is that something
You know
you
what?
picked
Yeah,
up?
grandfather wise, but it's Vucan, but it should be Vucani, right? So they dropped the I. You
Okay.
know, at that time it was a little bit different, you know, with how people viewed the Italians, I guess.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we're super excited today. You know, there's I really am, and we talked again the other day about this. I'm fascinated. You know, as a former high school coach, I'm always fascinated by great leaders and guys that have done incredible jobs like yourself in coaching. And I've always tried to learn from guys like yourself who have been successful. But the thing that most resonates, I think, with you, and I know you were an assistant coach under Larry Hughes for a number of years, but your first year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you went to the state tournament in your first or second year as a head coach. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So we, when I took over in 2017, was with Larry from 2011 to 2017. Was hired that summer of the 2016-2017 school year, and was fortunate to get the job with us. You know, and obviously it was a dream come true, and we were fortunate to make a good run that first year. We only had 2 or 3 starters back, and you know, I was a little worried. And Larry used to kid me. He says, "I think the cupboard's bare," and so forth. And so we got fortunate, got on a run, got hot, and got out there, and ended up losing in the state semifinal to Deer Park, which is a really good club and deserving club.
So that's great in its own right, and obviously in Texas at the highest classification, that's an incredible feat. It's like you know, when I was in Louisiana, that'd be like playing in 4 or 5 states to get to, you know, to get to that final round where you guys
Right.
were. But that wasn't the only thing you did. You kept doing it over the last 4 years, correct? You guys have been in the state tournament and have won 2 in a row, and so that's the question. Yeah, getting there, awesome, way to go, you know. But to do it the next 3 years and to win it in the last 2 years is really amazing. That's an amazing feat, and I know you know, yes, you have to have great players, I understand that, but you also have to have systems or some kind of way that is doing, you know. And so anyway, I want you to talk about that and give us some insight, if you would, to what is the secret of Southlake's success.
I'll be honest with you. The secret's definitely not Larry Buchan. I can tell you that. I think, and I mean that all sincerely. I mean, I think I used to watch Southlake Carroll play football all the time when I was in El Paso. So I moved from El Paso, Texas, the year that I got here. It was 2010, 2011, and I was fortunate to get an assistant job here. But I will tell you, I couldn't believe when I got here what the classroom situation was like. Everything, it's everything you hear about. So I was a transplant, and didn't grow up knowing a whole lot, just watching them on, like everybody did, play football, and didn't really know much at all about their baseball program. And I think once you get here, you realize real quick that the secret sauce is the fact that, and quite honestly, I still believe this. People may disagree with this, but I think it's the fact that they're dragons from elementary to middle school, all the way to high school and the senior high, and they're the same color schemes, they're the same logo. They develop this bond and this connection with each other, and they get to the point where they're like brothers and sisters, and they've known each other for so long, and they're all of the same ilk, basically, from a mentality standpoint, and that tradition just kind of keeps feeding itself. And it's kind of ingrained in them, and I think really that's the secret. It's in everything they do, whether it's cross country, swimming, whatever it happens to be. We're just fortunate I think the biggest fear is just not to mess it up too much.
Well, you've definitely not done that, and it seems like you've taken it even to a new level. There's a lot of kids in your program. Baseball is very popular in your school, and it seems like you've been able to keep a lot of those kids involved. How have you been able to do that and still be able to bring them in and develop your players, and then field the kind of a program and teams that you have?
Yeah, that's the challenge. We have a freshman and sophomore campus that's a dirt field. And then just a couple of years ago, we were fortunate that the taxpayers signed off on a bond. And actually, you know how that works. It was years before that. And then it came to fruition. And we have a turf field and an indoor facility that's got 8 lanes in it, and we can push them all back and have an infield in there. And it's got weights in there, so we don't have to share with football and so forth. And so I think that is taken to another level, but that was just the last 2 years that we've been able to actually utilize that. And so I think really with 107 kids, typically within our program, we've got 5 teams, 2 freshmen, 2 JVs, and a varsity. And we keep probably 28 to 30 and have those talks with them about, being a part of the community and understand they know that and they understand their roles. And so we don't get a whole lot from the Railbirds with regard to being, especially as we get deeper into the year. They're really excited in January, as everybody knows. But then when you get into April and the weather starts to change and graduation's coming, you could start to see their enthusiasm when they're not playing start to kind of fade. But I think a lot of it here is just that mentality and that tradition that kind of keeps fueling them, that they want to leave their mark. And so you don't really deal with that. So we can handle having 28 to 30 kids on the roster. And really, you get down, as everybody knows, to 11, 12, 13, maybe 14 guys that are really out there consistently as you make your run, that are making impact. But I think the key thing is just really the majority of the time, just like everybody that we're probably talking to right now is, I was doing it before I got on this, is spending the time with practice organization to create that environment that is, efficient for them and conducive. And, we all love our kids, and we want to make sure that whether the top kid or the bottom kid, the 107th kid in the program, that they're at least getting a practice schedule that can help them get better. And I think that's where it is. We're fortunate where we have 5 coaches in the off season in the fall to help us with those numbers. And we're not at 107 in the fall. We just unfortunately had to cut some kids, 22, 23 kids just a couple of days ago. And that's always the hardest part. But so we're down to 71, 72 in the fall. And the big thing is how do we break them up and get the weights and conditioning program in, and then obviously get the skill development in with them. And so that's the challenge. But the time that you put into the practice scheduling and the master list and the moving around of the parts and creating the teams within the teams, and then just making those connections, I think that's where the challenge is. But if you're, just like everybody that, like I said, we're talking to is doing that, they're investing that time. And your product, quite honestly, has helped us tremendously, because it with all those kids, it allows us to be able to use the iPad, and the mechanism of the machine to walk around and coach and free up a coach. And so I think that's been a big contributor as well.
That's great. You if I was to guess, I would say that you are you're not afraid of technology. In fact, you probably embrace it pretty well. Is that correct? Is that safe?
Yeah. Oh, I'm afraid of it, especially in the classroom now with this asynchronous learning and everything. But you have to. I'm not great with technology, but I'm smart enough, I hope, to hire people who are. And so within the coaching staff, that's why, as you know, when I come to bring the machine last week to you to help get it fixed, I come with a large contingency of guys, because I want them all to listen and learn and be aware of everything we're hearing, so that if I forget or I mess it up, that somebody else can fix it for me and pick me up. So I think that's a big part too.
Yeah, and technology isn't just about the actual devices. It's more about seeing those things come together, integrating different systems, and that has impressed me about you and your organization is you've found a way to really quantify what's going on in practice, and I think all of us would agree that you want to keep up with you have to evaluate every day, and you're always looking, but you've taken it a step further, haven't you?
Well, for us, I have. I don't know, like I said, what everybody else is doing. I mean, I always ask. Everything I have, just like everybody talks about, is borrowed, and you just kind of try to fit it to your system. But I think what we're doing is I started the system when I was actually at El Paso Franklin, and I was doing it mostly because I felt like I had to justify roster spots and cuts and everything. And I honestly felt like I wasn't doing a good job with that. I didn't think it was necessarily the parents' fault. I didn't think they were overboard. They were asking intelligent questions, and I quite honestly didn't have intelligent responses to it. And so I had to really look inward and say, okay, you know what, I've got to fix this, because everything that I'm doing is very subjective. And I have a bias, a confirmation bias sometimes. And I'm looking at this from a psychological perspective. And I was just, man, I'm hurting kids. And more importantly, I'm not going to be in this very long, because I'm going to be frustrated with all the emails, and then the community is going to be upset. So I created a system based on what we wanted to do was have an index number. And I'm not really good, as how to tell you about looking at all the stats on Game Changer and then going to the next stat and compare and contrast. What I'd like to have is one number. So I really wanted to just get it down to one number. And so we started calling it, and it's not in relation to the WAR stat that you get in Major League Baseball and stuff, but we just started calling it the WAR stat. And it's, of course, it's wins above replacement, but it's not the same equation you see there. So what ours was I wanted to know what I could measure consistently, and so and all fall, and have something every day that we would accumulate, and then by the end of the week, every week, we would post it on Monday, the rankings, whatever it happened to be, whether it was the metrics of weight of 1 rep bench, squat, exit speed, exit velo, arm speed, whether it was, whatever it happened to be of those rankings and those metrics. And then we could provide data to show them where they're forecasting, where they're trending. And we made sure early on, I used it as an I gotcha. And I realized real quickly that that's not the way to go either. You start creating these relationships, and you can pull kids and use it as an example to pull them aside, say, hey, listen, this is where you're strong. This is where you're weak. But we would take all those numbers, if there were 6 columns, and we started taking that and saying, okay, with regard to that kind of stuff, we would see where you rank. So if Johnny was number 1 in 1 rep max and in the early term metric, and he was number 10 in hard hit baseballs in practice, which we tally, and I got a bunch of managers, as I was telling you, that were in my psychology class and needed a PE credit. And so I figured out they were smart, and I just said, hey, would you like to get a PE credit real easily? And all you have to do is do a chart for me every day. And so once I recruited them, I trained them what to look for, whether it was base running, fielding, whatever it happened to be, and kept them away from the boys. They had to sit in the stands away from each other as well. And they had a chart, and they tallied every day off. We ran live BP every day and made them use wood bats, and that was our HHBs, and that was subjective too until Rapsodo came. The Rapsodo has changed me on that, but at that time I'm throwing BP every day, or an assistant was, and we would make a decision on HHB, on hard hit ball. Was it squared up? Was it on plane? Were we getting backspin and carry and that kind of stuff? And then when I would shake my head, the girl saw me, and she would tally that in the HHB. So by the end of the fall, we would have all these measurements. We'd have 700, 800 swings on these kids. And then we'd have whatever that was, if they had 285 HHBs out of the 700 swings, and where they ranked on that, we would take that number, we would take it with all our metrics, whether it's, you know, how many balls they got hit to them defensively, how many base running mistakes they made in live BP, you know, whatever it happened to be, and rank them, and then divide them by the number of columns we were ranking, and we got down to an index number. And so low score wins, just like in golf. So if Johnny over 16 columns was 21.4, then what I was using that as an objective measure, and I was going back to parents and saying, listen, we evaluate daily in practice. It's not just about stats and summer ball or select and travel and this and that. Those are all great, and if I can get access to those, I'll do that as well. But we were taking all those numbers, and I would now felt confident to be able to communicate with a parent, at least somewhat intelligently, that I had an idea what I was doing. And I don't know if I did or not, but I was able to communicate that. And so that led later, once I got here, I thought, man, there's got to be a great system. And I was like, and he's an incredible coach and obviously a winning coach, but it was very different in his approach, which as you guys know, in baseball, there's so many different approaches that win. So it's not a one size fits all deal. But I thought, man, if I can bring that and tweak it. So the whole time I was an assistant, I thought, man, if I ever get another job, I'm gonna tweak it a little bit. And so that's what we did. And so I was able, when I got the job, to implement it here. And we get down to one number. And what I've found now, it's not a cover myself with parents anymore. What I've seen since being here since 2017 as the head coach is those are the dudes. The top 12, 14 on our WAR ranking index number are the guys that are out on the field that are making an impact. And it was by accident. I wasn't looking at the rankings going, okay, this guy's going to play. I'm going to fill out my lineup based on that. It just so happened to be that. And I didn't pay attention the first couple of years, but that's what it was. And it's continued to be that way. So we feel like we're onto something with regard to what we're doing. It's not novel. It's not complicated in any way, shape, or form. It's just really just it's actually trying to stupid it down for me to where I got down to one number. And that's really what it was.
So that's fascinating. And so that just brings a couple of questions that I have. I'm sure others have questions, but number one is, I heard you say you're a psychology teacher. So you're thinking that way, and you've already talked about your relationships with parents and community, your kids. So who gets to see this magic number?
Well, we actually show the kids 3 times a year. So whatever we have accumulated from the summer after I'm done compiling, and we do our Excel, everything's off Excel, and we create now I've got enough smart guys on my staff that have been a lot better than I, and they've created the system where they understand how to really work the Excel sheets and put all the formulas in there. So we just have to input through, and now we've got a new one through Google Docs, which everybody's probably far more familiar than I am with, where it's integrated in that. And so it's live. And so we have somebody with an iPad that's just tallying everything. We don't need 10 girl managers watching everything or whatever. So they get it 3 times a year. We give them what they did, or if I have summer stuff, and then what they did over the spring season once we accumulate that. So the first week of school, like last week, we sat down and showed them the WAR rankings. And then we'll do it again in 9 weeks when we remeasure. It's called the midterm metric evaluation. And then obviously we do it the next 9 weeks before we break for holiday season and Christmas. And that gives us a real momentum going into, our cuts when we come back, and then into the season in late January.
It's beautiful. It reminds me of the old adage, what you don't inspect, you neglect. And so now I'm fascinated by knowing, and you've named a few of those things that have made whatever you said, maybe 16 columns. There's 16 different important pieces of information that you want. Have you changed that list? Have you added anything, or maybe said, you know what, that's something that I don't need it? How has that worked out?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'll give you an example, and this can be tailored to any program. It's everybody's going to have their own philosophy on what matters to them. For us, it's really, quite honestly, is get on base, and then we're going to do everything we can to put pressure and go. So I think on base percentage is at a premium. We use that category. We don't use batting average. The only part of batting average that we use in our factoring is batting average of balls in play. But we're really looking at quality at bats, which our quality at bat equation is a little bit different, but we're trying to see a lot of pitches. We teach a lot in the fall with regard to pitch recognition. We set up cages with machines that are going a little harder just so that they can recognize with velo what a strike is. We put the trainer back there, the pitching trainer back there. And so if they hear it hit off that mat, they know it's a strike, but we're kind of okay with that. That's not an HHB tally cage. That's a cage where they need to learn and discipline themselves. And that's the same with cage 2, whether it's a left-hand spinner or right-handed spinner off the hack attack or the FungoMan, they're getting movement and they're having to get positive feedback on the strike zone. And so I think that on base percentage obviously is a category for us. Pitches seen per at bat is one of those. So it's not the normal stuff. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, that just gives us an indication because we put such a premium on getting on base and then running. The extra base hits is a big part of that as well. So HHBs, obviously, we've talked about that. It's a big part of that. And so we draw that in. And then, I'm trying to think of them off the hand. Obviously, total bases is one that maybe some people don't utilize as much, but we like the total bases factor or column. So these are for us, there's 14 of them. But I took out batting average. I took out at bats even. And for me, plate appearances are more important for us. And so when you take out the batting average, you focus more on those other things that are conducive to getting on base. I think that's been a big help for us.
That's really good. And I heard you say something about not every drill is measured. And so can you speak to that? Because, when you show up to practice as a player, I would imagine your kids know that it's on. I mean, there's a competitiveness, I'm sure, but there's also, I mean, explain how you, because you're developing kids as well, right? So some of those drills you said aren't necessarily ranked.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think, we start in the classroom, and I've learned that from a lot of coaches, but, we start in the classroom. So what I've learned is you show the drill, you tell them what the objective of the practice is. And then we've got old video that we started keeping probably 4 or 5 years ago of different, where it took me a long time to compile it, but you have if you're going over relays, tandem relays, you're not going to measure that necessarily, but you'll show the video of what it looks like after you explain where you need to be as far as spacing, who needs to get out there, this, and what the communication needs to be. So we show the video and then we go out and we practice it, but we're not measuring what we're working on tandem and those kind of drills. So not everything is measured. But a lot of what we're doing, if you really feel like this is an area where you can be constructive with your criticism and you're going to nail them on, then you probably do what I found. You do want to measure it because you want to show them, hey, this is where you are. This is where you need to be relative to your peers. And I think the only thing that's going to help you do that and quantify that is going to be the measuring. But yeah, you got to be fun. We're not measuring pepper. We play pepper a lot. I mean, we're to try to work a bad angle and manipulate the barrel, that kind of stuff. But we're not measuring that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Very good. You have a daily routine. You've talked a little bit about the dailies. What does that typically look like, and what is the focus of a daily practice at Southlake?
Well, the focus first and foremost, to be honest with you, and this is something I had to learn because I wasn't good at this part early on in my career, but is saying hello to every kid that walks into our classroom environment for practice. Okay. And so that's the first thing. So making sure I know all their names. And if there's something I need to say positive, I felt like that about practice, I try to say something positive. I'm not always great at that, but at least I'll know their name, look them in the eye and tell them thanks for coming today and this and that. And so I think making that connection to them, that they know they're alive amongst the masses that are walking in that locker room, I think is the first thing that we do daily. And I try to get my staff to do that too as well. And they're really good at that. But I think the daily is the classroom. It's the classroom objectives that we do. And whether it's going over video of practices and what they can expect that day, or if it's a motivational day and things change like that, and I got this actually from Jim Schlossnagle at TCU. And I know that Corbs runs it over at Vanderbilt as well, but they have a classroom. And so when they were building this monster, I asked them if they could help us with a classroom type locker room area where we could turn that in with some tables and so forth and project images and video and stuff off of. And so that's been really helpful for us. They know they start with a notebook every day. And sometimes it's not even baseball. Sometimes it's, I mean, we were just talking the other day about legacy, the All Blacks of New Zealand rugby players, and talking about the key characteristics of success with them and how leaders gain the privilege of being the workers and having to clean up the locker room and the dugouts and be basically the vestibules of creating team chemistry. And I think, so it's not always just about baseball, but that's a daily for us. And then everybody's doing the other dailies. I mean, the band work, the arm care before they pick up a baseball, their pitching progressions, their throwing progressions, their hitting progressions from tee to front toss to live, and what you're doing with team defense and so forth. So and the fundies, all that stuff we're doing. So I don't think it's that much different, quite honestly, than what everybody else is doing.
So this next question is two-part. What's your proudest coaching moment, and what would you consider the biggest, maybe not failure, but learning experience that you've had?
Wow. I think my proudest probably coaching moment overall, it's not the state championships, I can tell you that. It's probably when I got this job. I mean, I just looking at the people, I'm not gonna lie to you, that applied for this position. Some of them I didn't even know they're from California and other places. I was humbled by that, and I think it made me feel like man, I've done a couple things right, maybe, and but you know, that having the opportunity to coach a place like this was a dream come true, and it was beyond my wildest dreams, to be honest with you. And I was humbled by it. I still am, and I sincerely. And so I think that was, and I felt like if we just create relationships, and that's all, everybody says that, but it's so true. If you invest in the kids, you connect with them, the drill stuff will take care of itself, but the kids will go out there and they'll fight, and they'll be determined, and especially in a community like ours where it's expected. So I think that's the proudest moment for me as far as coaching. And then what was the other question on top of that?
What would you consider the biggest learning experience? Where have you seen maybe your time when you went, well, wow, I just learned something incredibly important?
Honestly, it's how to treat people. It's from the janitor in our locker room to just to the 107th kid, to the parents, to the teachers in the hallways, to the umpires, to the opposing coaches, which you guys know it's very competitive. So you're never perfect with that either, for sure. And I'm definitely not. But you know, you just it's understanding that this is such a small part, really. I didn't always feel this way when I was younger. I was brash and all this other stuff, and some would say maybe still am. But I think mostly you realize that we're all in this together, and we're all, if you just invest in kids and you get after it, and just plan your whole preparation and put the time into that, the kids will notice that. They'll be grateful for that, and they'll go out there and execute the plan every day, and you can feel good when you go to bed every night. But I wasn't doing that early on. I thought it was a confrontational deal with umpires, with anybody that was in my way, and you learn very quickly. So that was the biggest learning environment or learning situation for me.
Great. That's really good. That's something we all, relationship with people is so important. It really is about people, and you're in the people business, and you to get that many people, pulling on the same rope and working towards a common goal is quite an achievement. And I know you're doing a good job of that. You've seen a lot of vantage points in high school baseball now. You've seen a lot of coaches. I know you're involved in the USA baseball program now. And what would you say would be the one thing you wish coaches would understand more of?
Wow, that's a really good question, and I hope I'm with USA Baseball. I'm not yet. I'm hoping that'll work out. But I think really what I would say that most coaches, from a standpoint of learning and if I had to give anything, it would be exactly, and I'm going to be repetitive about this, is that take care of your staff, invest in those guys, take care of them, take care of their families. When you have a chance to order, this is simple, okay? So I'm going to be as simple as I can, but when you have a chance to buy in your activity account or your booster club funds, you know, an extra pair of shoes, and you hear that, you know, one of your coach's kids needs an extra pair of shoes to go play some football or something, and you get a chance to help them out in any way, shape, or form, you find a way to do it. And typically that's coming from my own pocket, obviously, but you know, I think that goes a long way. It's just recognizing, being in tune, and identifying people's needs. You know, and I think when you do that, they're going to work hard for you, and you got to delegate. You got to trust these guys, and they're all very talented coaches for the most part. They just want to know that their ideas matter, and that they can go out and be themselves and coach within their personality. And I think when you take care of them like that, then they're going to want to do those kind of things. And so when you give a drill to a guy and you're hoping that he can go execute the drill at the level you want it to be, when you put it on the practice schedule, that you've invested in that coach. And I didn't always do that. So I think that's my biggest thing to coaches or that I had to learn, was that part of it.
What about parents?
Yeah. You know, honestly, Romy, I get that question at Southlake Carroll more than any question, is how are the parents at Southlake? And I'm going to be honest with you, and they're not even listening. And I'm in a classroom, they're not listening. They're really good, actually. And I think a lot of that, obviously, when you win, I mean, that helps. But and I'll let you know after this year if something goes bad, maybe we'll have a different discussion. But I think if you're fair with kids, you treat them with respect, which most do, and whether they're winning for you, they're losing for you, they're struggling, whatever it happens to be, you have a kind word for them, and you have a plan for them. You're efficient with them, and you treat them pretty much as all the same with regard to the respect factor. You know, not everybody's going to get the BP. Not everybody's going to get the time. Like I said, we have close to 20 guys that are really become practice players. But again, they're not treated like practice players. And so I think parents will give you a little bit of slack when their kid's not playing. I still get the emails, but, you know, I don't get the follow-ups really as much as I did early on in my career, where the follow-up typically doesn't go to the principal, it goes to the superintendent or the athletic director, because of the way you handled it. So again, that's another learning lesson for coaches, is to be able to handle those situations a little better. But they're good. The parents actually overall have been very supportive, and in a community like this, it's a privilege for sure.
So you've talked about, you know, how you create a practice that's, you know, you're measuring things, you're creating these drills that are going to help everyone, and everyone knows that, hey, these things matter. Does that help in the way the kids approach practice? And does that help you when it comes time for the game?
Big time. Actually, the area, that's a great question, actually, because as I was telling you earlier, in March and April, they start to fade. Graduation comes, parents are, you know, getting ready for that. Seniors have already decided what school they're going to go to in college, and they're not playing. And then, as you know, the weather changes and the grind really kicks in. And we've been fortunate over the last few years to be in that grind of 6 weeks in Texas to get there to Round Rock. And so you know, when the weather changes, you're on turf and you're playing in the heat, and you're practicing in the heat, and you know, if you're fortunate to get to Round Rock, you're going to play. If you're especially fortunate to play on the Saturday, the last day of the year, it's really hot, you know, and so these kids start to wear down if they're not playing, and they're like, what's my contribution? But again, it goes to those relationships, and you hold them accountable, and you tell them early on, and then you keep them involved. And there's different tricks to doing that. It's having some fun with BP and having home run contests with just those guys, and they love that kind of stuff. And really just highlighting them. It's whether it's in the team meeting room that you highlight their academic progress, and the fact that they got you know, admitted to Harvard or to Texas or something like that. You identify them, and that draws them back in, even if maybe amongst their peers they're not having a great season from a standpoint of contributing on the field. They're still knowing that they're a big part of that rope, right? That that's everybody's trying to pull on. And so I think that's more of a challenge. I do more of that, honestly, Romy, than I do any more of the fundamentals and the teaching of the game from the standpoint of I do practice schedules heavy and organization. And I think I spend more time trying to connect with kids. I think I do miss some of the day-to-day, hey, get your elbow here with relation to your front foot and all that other stuff. I miss that kind of stuff, but I got great guys doing that. So yeah, that part is rewarding for sure.
That's really good. My pastor always talks about to see the one, and to not be a guy that looks at himself, but he sees the one out there. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. And there's a principle that you literally are creating a team and in that, and it's obviously working. So it's a really great point. Got another question for you. After all these years, and you've been doing it a while now, I didn't get the exact number, but is it over 20 yet?
Oh yeah, I've been going since my first job was I was a varsity soccer coach at El Paso High School in 1994.
Right.
There wasn't a baseball position open, so I did that for 1 year. The head coach had just left. I was doing my teaching, my practice teaching, and got hired right on the spot as the varsity soccer coach. So that was 1994. So I've been pretty much going since then.
Well, you were in Italy, so I guess they figured you knew how to play soccer, right?
Yeah, well, that's what he said. And yeah, but I was playing baseball, I wasn't doing the soccer. So I was able to call my friends, and they were able to give me some formations and things to do. But I don't know anything about soccer. So
That's so funny. Well, what are the things that you've seen change? I mean, you've listed a few just in the technology world, but anything in particular about kids or parents or other coaches or people in general? You're a psychology guy, so give us some insight.
No, I don't think I don't think honestly, and I'm going to get hammered for this. I don't think kids have changed so much. I think it's us. I think I've changed, and it's having to check myself on as we get older. I know that the brain definitely responds to challenge, and so it's us staying challenged and being able to reorganize and adapt to environments that are constantly changing. And although we like to label that kids aren't as tough as they used to be, and I even found myself using it today because I didn't like how honestly I think we lost practice today, and we put a premium on winning practice, and I kind of put that up at the end of the week that we won 4 out of the 5 practices today, or we lost 4 out of the 5, whatever. But I was talking about you guys, they were upset because they had to hit off a machine, and they don't like necessarily hit off a machine. And even though it's phenomenal and it's throwing strikes and changing speeds and doing all the things we want to do to be able to evaluate their ability to do that, they didn't like it. And so I saw some body language I didn't like. And I said, you guys, there's 3 stages of life. There's the marshmallow stage, the jelly bean stage, and the hard rock stage. And a lot of that has to do with body language, attitude, and and really not being secure in yourself that you can't fail without there being an excuse. And so I found myself going back and saying things like, man, we used to play wiffle ball. We didn't play the video games and this and that. And I had to stop myself and go, man, if I was allowed to play the kind of video games that these kids had today, I don't know if I'd have gone out and played wiffle ball either. So, so I don't know how much they've changed. I think it's more us. And I think we have to adapt to the environment that we're living in and the situations that we're surrounded with. And obviously society's changing in front of us in a lot of ways. And so being aware of the environmental changes and so forth doesn't mean you have to accept all of it, but you definitely have to be aware of it for sure.
Very good. Well, I want to touch again on the your practice, this practice plan, this WAR number. Is there one number that you look at of all those stats? Is there a favorite of yours?
Yeah, I kind of touched upon it a little bit, but it's the pitches per scene per at bat is the one that for me tells me a little bit about grit. And we use the grit thing just like a lot of people do. But the grit, we even label it. We don't label it necessarily pitches seen per at bat. We call it the grit column because that tells us that you can take a 3-2 slider or cutter or whatever it happens to be, or even a fastball off the plate, because you've done it for so long, you have an idea, and you're willing to not chase that pitch to be able to get on base, and that you have trust in the guy behind you to do the same and to execute what he needs to do. And I think so for me, that says a lot more about the buy-in factor from your kids. That they're taking what we're doing in practice and spending the time taking pitches. And a lot of them early on were wondering, why are we in 2 cages taking pitches? What's that about? We're not even swinging necessarily. And I said, well, you got to learn how to take pitches. You got to learn the strike zone, and we're going to do this daily. And so I think once we got into that, I think that became something that we really started to evaluate and really, really enjoy. So I like that. That's my favorite, is that grit, pitches seen per plate appearance is a big one for us.
Very cool. You reminded me when you said that, my first year of playing pro ball, I played with Will Clark. He came right out of Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second pick in the draft, or maybe the first pick, I can't remember, but he showed up with in Fresno, California with the Giants, and had an amazing discipline at the plate. And this is a first time player, steps onto a pro field, and was like adamant about balls just off the plate when they got called a strike, when it was in his mind a ball. But the more I watched him play, the more I believed him, and really, because he made a very big deal out of it, and it came out of a confidence that it sounds like you're developing in kids now, and I think that's super valuable. It obviously worked for him, and he was an incredible disciplined hitter, and that, I think that had a lot to do with it. There's I'm always interested. You already named a couple of books, that one of them being Legacy. I love that. Grit is another one that's another great book. Can you list a couple more? It sounds like you're a reader, and you're obviously pulling resources in left and right, but maybe share some of your favorite resources for anything, learning of baseball, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I like anything with regard to the behavioral sciences. So, I mean, I really do enough. A lot of that's the psychology. I enjoy the classroom a lot, and so I like anything with regard to classical conditioning with Piaget and stuff. I mean, I'm a nerd with regard to that part of it. I like the operant conditioning guy with Skinner and so forth. So anything I can get on them through I like to look at those journals and I'm just fascinated by that part of it. So I don't know if they're necessarily novels, but I like to look at the journals on the new stuff. And then obviously from a baseball standpoint, I love Augie Garrido. Life is yours to take, kind of, I think that's what it's called. Life is yours to win by Augie. It's by my nightstand, and it's been there for a long time. I probably read it 4 or 5 times, but he's obviously he was very impactful to me and to all of us probably as baseball coaches. I grew up in Southern California like you did. And so, I was in Laguna, Dana Point area, and my dad would take me all the way up to Fullerton inland to attend his camp. So I was a big fan of his early on. And then when I got a job in El Paso coaching, I got to work Texas's camps when he moved over to be the head coach at UT. So anything he does, I like. There's a book called Snapshot by Dan Corum that I'm currently reading that I think it's called The Art of Profiling by Dan Corum. And that's been out a couple years, 2 or 3, maybe even a little longer. But I've had it for a while, but I've never really read it. And then for psychology purposes, I wanted to read it to be able to communicate to my kids in class. I teach the AP psychology course. And so they're challenging enough, those kids. And so I think just being a step ahead of them. And then I really found out how we evaluate and identify people on first impressions and things like that. I think it's a really, really good book. A lot of insight with regard to how we really view people when we first come across them, and what characteristics and attributes, and how we basically subconsciously either write them off or write them in, and what's the process for us doing that at the subconscious level. It's kind of neat.
So we have I wanted to I need to pull these up, but one of the coaches that you guys were in a tournament, I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong because I don't have it in front of me, but you played in a tournament in El Paso, and the coach is from New Mexico.
Oh, Albuquerque. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great
and
guy.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm
great. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
If you're online, Coach, do me a favor and text your question. I don't have it in front of me, and I apologize, but I'm trying to pull it up. But yeah, he had sent some questions, and obviously you guys, I think you guys played a really close game. It sounded like
He did. He did. He
he
had a
was a
great
pretty good
club.
coach in
Yeah.
his own right. Um, but yeah, he was definitely. Definitely one of those coaches you could tell he could tell about your club, even though you guys, I think you beat them 3-2 or something like that. But just, through the years, you've had these kinds of relationships with these other coaches, other tournaments, or other, playing guys from all over the country. Um, what do you get out of doing that? Do you feel like that helps your kids doing those kind of things?
Yeah, big time. I think what you're talking about was Albuquerque last year, and I think it was if I'm not mistaken, it was the third day of the tournament. So you're playing double headers on Thursday, Friday. We played 6 games and then 2 on Saturday, and I think that was the 5th game in El Paso. And we'd already known they had a great program, and it was everything as advertised. I mean, they do such a good job. Their kids are disciplined. The coaches are. I mean, he's such a good person. I mean, just his attitude throughout the entire game. I'm in the third base box and listen to how he addresses his kids. Um, just phenomenal. So much respect, and I could learn a lot from him, obviously. And I did that day. I mean, his kids played incredibly well and took us to the very end. I think we got fortunate, quite honestly. We made a play, if I remember correctly, in the 6 hole. Threw a guy out, and that was a close bang bang play, and we got the benefit there. But it could have been tied up, and who knows what happens. But they were really good. But yeah, I think just exposure playing teams like that out of Albuquerque, which is one of the top programs out there, and they do really well. But we'll go out and we'll play. We'll do all we can to play in California. We've gone out to Northern California with John Diotti out there at Valley Christian in Northern California, and we played Eric Borba, who's a phenomenal coach at Orange Lutheran, and they came up. And then we just over the years we've been able to play, and obviously friends with a lot of great coaches out there. The Hoover, Alabama coach is phenomenal, and there's some great coaches obviously around us that I learned from. So I think the more exposure you get with these guys, the more you learn just how just the intricacies of the game. So we want to expose our kids to it, to great baseball, and we want to expose ourselves just on a personal level to great programs. And so that's kind of been the goal in scheduling.
One of his questions was, what kind of intensity do you demand from your kids daily at practice? As intense as our game, or as intense as in a game, or does it change each week depending on the schedule?
It does change. To sit there and tell you we're nailing, fighting, and that, I always hear that you're supposed to replicate the speed of the game in every drill you do every day. So I used to work really hard at that, and then I just basically wore out on that, and I wore my kids out with that. And so I think you've got to have some parts in there where you're doing what you have to do to also make it fun. So the music is an aspect that we do. We don't have it on when we're teaching, but we definitely have it on when we're not. And we allow the kids, and sometimes it's the other kids who aren't playing as much, to have their playlist and have fun with that. We'll do the slip and slide stuff that everybody does with regard to the wet and wild thing, and slide and make fun of that. We'll do the hot box deal, the pickle stuff, where we have some fun with that. We'll even run routes, but they have to wear gloves, and football's a big thing around here. So a lot of those guys still think they can play football, and some of them can, but so it's not always as intense as sit there and say that it's Alabama football during baseball. It's not that, definitely. But, when it's time to work, they know the segments. It's highlighted when we're in the classroom about, hey, listen, this is game speed here, man. And that's where you demand those other guys who maybe aren't going to be in the 16 and batting practice are giving you good looks as runners at first and third team defense. Or so again, I think you pick your spots. I didn't always do that, but that's what seems to be working for us.
It's very good. Yeah, I heard you say that you made that a point in the meeting. I think putting an expectation and everybody understanding it, that sounds like a really healthy way of doing it. That way, no surprises, right? Everybody knows going in, that's what you're going to be doing. It's game speed here, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, he also asked about how much you delegate to your assistant coaches, and you did say earlier that you have to trust your assistant coaches, and you do that. What are some examples you can say maybe that you would maybe as a younger coach be reluctant to hand over, but now as you've gotten older and maybe learned, um, you would delegate that part of your practice to.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think would have never have delegated, even as a head coach. I would have never delegated pitching in the past when I was younger. I just felt like that was that and the battery in general, stealing strikes with the catcher, being on the same wavelength, just the pitch sequencing of calling and preparation of pitching and arm development was something I didn't want to give away. I felt like that's where you win or lose games at the high school level. And so I was really hesitant at doing that. But again, you go out and you get good people. And, I had my first couple of years, I had great people working for me, but I didn't let them work. And they didn't stay very long, and I don't know if I would have either, quite honestly. And so I think once you learn to let that go and trust, you still have in your preparation, you're talking about kind of what your ideas are on these things, but you open it up and you do, you allow them to kind of infuse their ideas in that. And it's going to be a little bit different, maybe from a technique standpoint sometimes, but as long as the macro fits and you can kind of put the parts of the micro in there and get to the same place and you're confident and comfortable with their direction, then I think you're good. If it's something that you feel like is going to, cause, some harm down the road in the macro, then that's probably a time you put you put the brakes on and say, hey, listen, we're going to do it this way. And this is why. But, like I said, I'm fortunate. We've got great people that work for us. Coach Whiteley is our pitching coach. He's phenomenal. Coach Sellers is something I don't do. He's phenomenal with social media. He loves that kind of thing, and he does an incredible job with that. We've got a weight and conditioning guy that's what he did in Oklahoma as a football coach, and he's one of our baseball assistants. He handles our baseball specific workouts. So I delegate that. I used to do all of that, and I'd drive myself nuts and get 4 hours of sleep because I felt like I had to do it all, and I wanted it to look just like me. And it can't be that way.
That's great. By the way, Ron Murphy is the coach from Rio Rancho.
Yeah.
Thank you, Coach, for submitting those questions. And it's we're about out of time, but if anyone else has any questions, please submit them in the chat. I just want to say, as a coach, here's what I'm hearing, and you've done this a lot. You've been in front of the camera a lot as a head coach. It's easy to talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk. And sounds like you're saying all the right things, Larry. But I also know that this is something that's who you are, and you're about it. And so it's a great, it says a lot about you as a coach and also as a man, that you've been able to take what you've learned and maybe as a young man transferred it and grown in even how you approach things. So I want to commend you on that, because I think that's something we all need to hear. I know I do, and appreciate that. So if no one else has any questions, I'm going to give you a chance to just kind of wrap it up, and we'll call it a night. But again, I'm so grateful you've come on tonight.
Well, thank you for everything and for the opportunity to talk to everybody, and mostly to want to thank you for the opportunity to use your machine, which has been invaluable. And that's not just a shameless plug. That is real, as you know, because we anytime that thing, if we have any problems, you come through for us and help us. But we have come to value that thing so much, as I said, not just on what it does defensively for us as far as reps, but also what it does for us for throwing pitches and sequencing and so forth, and all the great technology that FungoMan is. And so it's a tool that has allowed us to be very successful, and quite honestly, it's been a big part of that in a lot of ways. So we can put it in the cage, we can put it in the indoor, we can put it out on the field for pre-practice ground balls, whatever it happens to be, and set up a schedule. So again, thank you for your commitment to the game. I've always admired, obviously, your head coach in college. You and I have talked about that, and I loved hearing your stories about him. I know the Pac-10 was such a big, important conference at that time, and listening to your stories, obviously, were motivating too, especially with Barry Bonds and so forth. So, Romy, I appreciate your friendship and everything you've given to us.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. You know, you were talking about Augie Garrido, and I respect him very much, but I don't like Augie. Rest in peace. But you know, he was the coach at Fullerton when I was at Arizona State, and they were the ones who won the 1984 World Series. So I just can't like him. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's exactly. You know, we all have detractors, right? So it is what it is. Yeah. I know.
No, great coach, and of course he did it so many different places and was successful. So I definitely respect him. But anyway, we're so grateful that you came on tonight. Tell your staff to thank you as well. We really enjoyed having you guys come down to the office the other day, and thank you all for joining tonight. If you guys have any suggestions, comments, anybody you'd like to hear on a future show, please let us know. We're super excited to do this. And, you know, I told somebody today, I don't know if anybody else is enjoying this, but I can tell you, I certainly am. So please let us know what you think about it. And again, join us next time. Larry, thank you again, and best of luck and best wishes this fall and as you guys go into the next season.
Thank you, Romy. Thank you, everybody. I'll be on next time listening. So thank you very much.
Take care now, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.